Welcome back to Hard Hat Chat. Everyone, I'm Justin Smith, CEO of Contractor Plus, and joining me, as always, is Gerritt Bake, CEO of Build Pro. Today, we're stepping into a topic that still gives half the industry flashbacks and makes the other half check their inventory twice before bed. The supply chain crisis proved one thing nobody was ready for. A topic that every contractor, supplier, rep, manufacturer, distributor, and honestly, every homeowner still has PTSD from. The supply chain crisis, and not just the crisis itself, but what it revealed. That literally nobody, not a single part of this industry, was actually ready for it. Not contractors, not suppliers, not reps, not manufacturers, not distributors, not logistics companies. Nobody. We all got caught with our boots half laced.
You're not kidding. I remember those months where calling a supplier felt like calling customer support for a satellite company. You'd sit on hold forever, and then the rep would be like, "Yeah, we have no idea when that part will be back in. Could be 3 days, could be 3 months, could be never." And then they give you that classic line, "Check back later." Meanwhile, you've got customers staring at you like you personally sailed the cargo ship that got stuck sideways in a canal.
The wild thing is how fast everything broke down. It wasn't slow, it wasn't progressive. It was like one day everything was normal, and the next day you're being told PVC fittings now have the same value as gold bars. And contractors everywhere started hoarding parts like they were prepping for the apocalypse. Guys were guarding their couplings and reducers like it was currency. You had trucks rolling around with enough copper to be mistaken for mobile banks.
And the funniest part, everyone pretended for a while that this was a small hiccup. You remember people saying things like, "It'll all stabilize in a month or two." Then those same people bought every water heater they could get their hands on because the writing on the wall was not subtle. If a water heater became available, you grabbed it like it was the last turkey at the grocery store on Thanksgiving.
And let's talk about the emotional roller coaster contractors went through. One minute you're quoting a job thinking materials will stay stable, and the next minute your supplier calls saying, "Hey, that material you priced last week, it went up 30%." And the customer still expects the original price because they saw a YouTube video from 2014 where everything cost $12. Contractors had to rewrite estimates more than high schoolers rewrite essays.
The crisis exposed something huge. The entire system is built on a delicate rhythm that nobody realized was so fragile. Everyone thought global supply chains were invincible. We assumed materials magically appeared on shelves. Nobody thought about how one virus, one shipping delay, one disrupted port, one shortage of truck drivers, one manufacturing slowdown, or one unexpected freeze could send the entire industry spiraling.
And it wasn't just shortages, it was substitutions, adjustments, improvisations. Contractors started using materials they'd never used before because it was all they could get. You'd walk onto job sites and hear conversations like, "Is this the right part?" followed by, "It doesn't matter, it's what we've got." Flexibility became survival.
And customers? Oh man, customers were not ready either. They'd say things like, "Why can't you just order it?" As if Amazon Prime secretly delivered commercial HVAC units overnight. Homeowners would expect tankless systems in 2 days, insulation in a week, cabinets by next month. And contractors had to be the messengers of realities no one wanted to hear. The crisis forced contractors to become negotiators, therapists, educators, and magicians.
And let's be real. The crisis exposed how dependent the entire industry is on parts from everywhere. You disrupt one region, one port, one factory, and suddenly the whole world feels it. A freeze in Texas impacts resin production. Resin impacts PVC. PVC impacts plumbing. Plumbing delays inspections. Inspections delay drywall. Drywall delays electrical trim out. And one small disruption suddenly triggers a domino effect that delays a whole house.
It put a spotlight on something everyone ignored. The trades rely on a global web of supply. Nobody really knew where their stuff came from. They just knew the supplier had it. Once the supplier didn't, the questions began. Why? When will it be back? Can I get something else? It was like the entire industry collectively learned the backstory of materials like they were reading biography.
And the unpredictability caused chaos in pricing. Contractors were adjusting estimates mid-job, suppliers were changing pricing weekly, sometimes daily, and homeowners were looking at contractors like they were running some kind of pricing roulette. But it wasn't greed, it was survival. Contractors weren't raising prices because they wanted to, they were raising prices because their costs changed before they could even get the part.
And training took a hit too. You had apprentices learning on random substitute materials instead of standard ones. People adapted, but it wasn't ideal. You can't build consistency when the tools and materials change by the week. It showed how much the trades rely on familiarity. And when that familiarity disappears, improvisation becomes the new rule.
But here's the part that stood out the most. Companies who were organized before the crisis survived better. Not perfect, nobody escaped unscathed, but better. The ones who had systems, communication protocols, inventory control, and digital workflows adapted faster. The businesses with everything in someone's head suffered hard. The crisis exposed a lack of preparedness on a scale the industry had never seen.
Contractors learned how vulnerable they were. Simple things like not having backup suppliers, not tracking inventory, not having real-time communication with customers, not forecasting jobs ahead of time. All of it suddenly mattered. And companies realized painfully that you can't run a business like you did in 1998 and expect to survive a global disruption in 2023.
And that's where the deeper conversation begins. The crisis didn't just expose weak points, it exposed the need for change, for technology adoption, better planning, stronger relationships with suppliers, smarter purchasing strategies, clearer communication with customers, and a more modern operations mindset. Because the crisis proved one thing. We were all operating on assumptions that couldn't survive pressure.
And in next part, that's exactly where we're going. The crisis revealed vulnerabilities, but it also revealed strengths. It showed who adapted, who froze, who pivoted, and who reinvented themselves. And the industry learned lessons that will shape the next decade.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. And hey, if you're a contractor looking to scale your business without adding more chaos, check out Contractor Plus. It's the only app you'll ever need to run your business from start to finish. CRM, estimates, invoices, and payments. Everything contractors need to manage jobs, stay organized, and grow their business in one place. Win more work, save time, and run a smarter operation with Contractor Plus. All right, we're back, where we start talking about what actually happened behind the scenes. The real world fallout on contractors, the scramble, the improvisation, the adaptations, and honestly, the emotional breakdowns that suppliers conveniently didn't see because everyone tried to act calm on the phone, even though their entire schedule was collapsing like drywall under a roof leak.
You could always tell when a contractor had just gotten off a call with their supplier. They'd walk into the office with that 1,000-yard stare. You'd ask what happened, and they'd just mutter something like, "They're out of everything," before quietly sitting down like a man who had just accepted his fate. You know it's bad when grown adults are whispering about PVC elbows like they're contraband.
And do you remember how every job suddenly became a negotiation with reality? You'd get an update saying a part was delayed. So you'd call the customer, and the customer would immediately think you were lying. They'd say, "I saw 3 of those in stock at Home Depot last week." And you'd be like, "Ma'am, if Home Depot actually has what you need, go. I will personally drive your car." Half the time, contractors were praying the homeowner was right, and they weren't. You'd go to Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware, 3 random hardware stores you didn't even know existed, and you'd still leave empty-handed.
That's the thing. Customers thought contractors were the bottleneck. Contractors thought suppliers were the bottleneck. Suppliers were pointing to distributors. Distributors were pointing to manufacturers. Manufacturers were pointing to international ports. Ports were pointing to shipping delays. Shipping delays were pointing to truck shortages. And the truck drivers were just shrugging like, "Look, man, I'm doing my best." It was a blame chain with no end.
And everyone was improvising. Contractors started calling suppliers like they were trying to negotiate a hostage situation. "Listen, I just need one valve. Just one." I'll take a scratched one. I'll take one missing a tag. I'll take a factory return. I'll take a slightly cursed one. Just give me something. It turned into rationing. People were trading materials like currency. You'd hear conversations like, I'll trade you 2 fittings for 1 roll of Romex. It felt like prison economics.
But beneath the comedy, there was something real happening. Contractors realized how dependent they were on everything running perfectly. Everyone thought they had backups. They didn't. They thought they had systems. They didn't. They thought they had relationships with suppliers. Turns out those relationships were built on years of normalcy, not resilience.
And this crisis forced contractors to face something uncomfortable, that they were operating without any real insulation. No buffer, no contingency, no true forecasting. Jobs were scheduled based on blind faith that the supply chain would cooperate. And the moment it didn't, everything collapsed.
The thing that stood out to me most was how many contractors suddenly realized the importance of communication, not just with suppliers, but with customers. Before the crisis, customers would get annoyed if materials got delayed by 2 days. Suddenly, contractors had to explain 6 weeks delays. And the best contractors were the ones who communicated honestly instead of making excuses. They set expectations early, they updated customers even when they had nothing new to share. And customers didn't love it, but they respected it.
And the companies that didn't communicate, they paid for it. Their Google reviews tanked, their customers snapped, their schedules got destroyed. Silence cost more than the shortages themselves. Contractors learned that in a crisis, customers don't need perfection, they need updates.
Another thing the crisis revealed was how fast pricing models became outdated. You used to be able to build a project estimate that was solid for 30 days. Then 30 days became 14. Then 14 became 7. Then 7 became, I'll call you in 30 minutes and see if anything changed. Contractors felt like stock traders watching live market volatility. Prices fluctuated so fast that they couldn't guarantee anything.
And that forced contractors to stop guessing and start calculating. They had to track costs in real time. They had to stop eating material increases. They had to include escalation clauses. They had to get comfortable saying, I know this price feels high, but this is the reality today. The crisis forced contractors to stop being shy about profitability, because every job underpriced during that period became a financial wound later.
In technology, oh man, this is where everything changed. The companies that had proper software in place, digital scheduling, real time material tracking, communication tools, updated pricing databases, they adapted faster. They weren't perfect, but they were better prepared. Meanwhile, companies running their entire operation on sticky notes and I'll remember that later got hammered.
The crisis highlighted a divide. There were contractors with systems and contractors with chaos, and chaos didn't survive well. Systems didn't eliminate the pain, but they reduced it. They helped teams adjust schedules quickly. They helped teams update estimates quickly. They helped teams track materials and reassign resources. The companies with systems were able to say, all right, let's pivot. The companies without systems said, what do we do? Everything's broken.
And then there were the suppliers. The relationship between contractors and suppliers became dramatic. Some suppliers stepped up. They communicated. They found alternatives. They held inventory for loyal customers. They were partners. Others ghosted contractors like a bad Tinder date. They stopped answering phones. They stopped giving ETAs. They stopped explaining anything. You'd walk into the counter and see 3 reps looking like they aged 10 years in 3 months.
But the crisis revealed something crucial. Suppliers value the contractors who build long-term relationships, the ones who show up consistently, the ones who pay on time, the ones who treat their staff with respect. Those contractors got prioritized. The transactional ones, the ones who only shopped for the cheapest price, found themselves at the bottom of the pile.
That was a wake-up call. Loyalty mattered in a way it never had before, because in times of scarcity, people protect the relationships that matter. Contractors learned that loyalty wasn't just a courteous business move, it was a strategic necessity.
And the frustration wasn't just materials. Labor shortages doubled the chaos. Job sites were half staffed. Experienced workers were retiring. New workers weren't coming in fast enough. You had trucks, tools, and jobs, but not enough hands. It felt like the entire industry was running a marathon with a sprained ankle. But here's the interesting piece. The crisis forced companies to become better employers, better communicators, better
Planners, better leaders. Contractors realized that if they didn't build a company culture that attracted workers, they were done. The supply chain crisis didn't just expose material shortages, it exposed leadership shortages. And that leads us into next part.
where we talk about the future. What changed permanently? What should contractors keep doing? What must they never do again? And what does a more resilient, more prepared, more modern contract
Business actually look like? If the crisis showed us what wasn't working, this part is about what will, because the next disruption will come, and the question is whether contractors will be ready this time.
Grab a drink, take a breath, and stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. And hey, if you're a contractor looking to scale your business without adding more chaos, check out Contractor Plus. All right, we're back. And this is where we look forward. Because the supply chain crisis didn't just disrupt a couple months of schedules, it permanently rewired the industry. It forced every contractor, every supplier, every distributor, every project manager to take a hard look at how fragile everything really was. And now the question is, what do we do with that knowledge? Do we go back to business as usual and pretend it never happened? Or do we adapt so the next disruption doesn't wipe us out?
The crazy thing is, the crisis didn't invent new problems. It just exposed the ones we ignored. Contractors always knew they were running lean. Suppliers always knew they were vulnerable to global shifts. Homeowners always assumed materials magically existed. Everyone thought the machine was big enough to be unshakable. And then one disruption came along and said, hey, let me show you where all the cracks are.
And the first crack was communication. Not skill, not demand, not craftsmanship, communication. The crisis proved that the companies who communicated clearly survived the chaos better. Not because they had more inventory, but because they had more transparency. Homeowners got frustrated, but they didn't feel lied to. Teams were overwhelmed, but they weren't caught off guard. Suppliers were strained, but they weren't blindsided. Clear communication turned chaos into something manageable.
And leadership, let's talk about that. The crisis separated leaders from people who simply owned a business. When everything hit the fan, the leaders were the ones who stepped up, kept their teams calm, made tough calls, reassured customers, and pivoted quickly. The ones who were just in charge froze. They didn't know how to adapt because they'd never been tested like that, and their businesses felt it.
What the crisis revealed is that you can't run a company in 2025 with a mindset from 1985. Back then, things were stable, predictable, local. Connection was slower, change was slower. But now the entire world is interconnected. One event across the globe can impact whether a plumber in Ohio gets his parts on time. And if contractors don't modernize operations, not trendy stuff, just basic modernization, they're setting themselves up for failure when the next big shift hits.
And modernization doesn't mean you must become a tech genius. It doesn't mean you need robots in your warehouse or drones flying over your job site. It means there has to be structure, systems, real scheduling, real forecasting, real material planning, real communication tools, real documentation, real visibility of what's happening in your business so you're not operating blind.
Because here's a hard truth. The crisis showed how many companies were relying on memory instead of management. The whole operation lived inside one person's head, and when the world went sideways, that head couldn't keep up. Companies who had digital systems, shared dashboards, job tracking, inventory data, customer updates, those companies adapted faster because their information didn't disappear when someone got overwhelmed.
But beyond systems, the crisis taught us something deeper about relationships. When everything fell apart, people leaned on the relationships they'd built long before the chaos. Suppliers prioritized contractors who treated them well. Contractors prioritized suppliers who communicated honestly. Teams trusted leaders who had been in the trenches with them, Customers stuck with companies that kept them informed instead of leaving them guessing.
Relationship equity became more valuable than financial equity for a minute. You could have all the money in the world, but if you didn't have the right relationships with suppliers, you weren't getting materials. Meanwhile, a contractor who'd been loyal for 10 years got a call saying, "We've got 2 units left. They're yours if you need them." And that changed the way a lot of contractors think about loyalty.
The crisis also forced contractors to get real about forecasting instead of winging it. Before, the industry ran on, we'll order materials when we start the job. Suddenly, that turned into, we need to order as soon as the contract is signed because who knows what next month looks like. And honestly, that level of planning should have existed all along. We were spoiled by convenience. The crisis just yanked away the safety net.
And maybe that's the biggest lesson. Convenience made us soft. It made us assume the world would always run smoothly. But construction was never meant to run on assumptions. It's too complex, too interconnected, too dependent on timing. And now contractors are learning to build real margins of safety into their operations. Not financial margins, although those matter too, but operational margins.
Exactly. The crisis taught companies to think 2 steps ahead instead of half a step behind, to prepare materials early, to build relationships stronger, to manage cash flow smarter, to train teams better, to adopt technology before they're forced to stay adaptable instead of comfortable.
And the truth is, we will see disruptions again. Not the same kind, but something. A new regulation, a new shortage, a new global shift, a new economic wave. Chaos is inevitable, but being blindsided by chaos doesn't have to be.
This is where contractors have to ask themselves one big question. Did the crisis change us, or did we survive it and learn nothing? Because going back to the old way of operating would be a mistake, a huge one. The crisis revealed weaknesses so they could be strengthened. If companies don't strengthen them, the next wave will hit even harder.
And it's not all doom and gloom. The companies that adapted are stronger now. They have better systems, better communication, better forecasting, better relationships, better margins, better teams. Those companies came out of the crisis with a sense of resilience they didn't know they were capable of.
And resilience is now the new competitive advantage. Not price, not speed, not even skill. Resilience, the ability to pivot, the ability to stay calm when the world throws punches, the ability to protect your people and your business even when everything outside your control is falling apart.
Think about this. The contractors who learned from the crisis aren't just more organized, they're more trustworthy. Customers trust honesty, teams trust stability, suppliers trust consistency. The crisis created a new standard for professionalism in the industry. Contractors who rise to that standard will lead the next era of the trades.
And that leads us to the closing thought of this entire episode. The supply chain crisis didn't ruin the industry, it revealed it. It showed us where we were vulnerable. It showed us how dependent we were on things we never thought about. It showed us how badly we needed better systems. And it showed us the incredible adaptability of the trades when their backs are against the wall.
Contractors weren't ready then, but they can be ready now. The tools exist, the systems exist, the lessons exist, and the companies that apply them are going to be miles ahead of everyone else when the next disruption comes.
Because the real measure of a contractor isn't how well they operate in perfect conditions, it's how they operate when everything goes wrong.
And now that everyone knows what wrong looks like on a global scale, the smart companies will never let themselves be caught off guard again.
This has been Hard Hat Chat. The crisis proved that nobody was ready, but it also proved that everybody is capable of becoming ready.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.